Hey, Michelle, what are we doing today?
Hey, Mattie. So today we're going to dive into kind of an ethically thorny topic, I guess you could say, and that's students who are kind of misrepresenting their academic interests on their college applications. So instead of going for that competitive major that they're truly interested in, instead what they're doing is going for like a less competitive major. So we're going to talk about all that today.
Strategic positioning. Let's do it.
All right, so there was actually a student who wrote into the New York Times, the column The Ethicist, with this question. So the student is interested in a really selective major, but their extracurricular interests don't necessarily align with that major. So in high school, they were actually kind of like in the linguistics club. They started that club, but that's not what they want to major in college. However, their question is, should they go ahead and choose that less selective linguistics major because it does align better with their extracurricular interests? So maybe giving them kind of a little bit of a leg up to get admitted because they're not going for that super competitive major. And then once they get into college, they'll switch. So I guess my question to you is, do you consider this misrepresentation or lying, or is this a sound strategy?
I actually read this one on my own. It was like, because I searched college admissions on New York Times, and it's hit or miss. But this one was it was a Miss Manners. It wasn't a college admissions piece. It was some like 78-year-old woman who's like I don't know.
Right.
Is it okay? So like in an ethical sense, absolutely. I guess in a logical sense, absolutely. In an ethical sense, probably. So the logical sense is that, well, college isn't where you go to get a 4-year guaranteed degree and move on and join the workforce. It's where you learn to learn, Michelle. We all read Excellent Sheep here. It is where like college is itself supposed to be a place where you figure out what you love and what inspires you in an educational realm, and then follow that path.
It's like an exploration. Yeah.
Yes, that is the ethos of college admissions, which I figured out around 3 to 4 years into becoming a college admissions consultant, and now understand. But like in a logical sense, so it's almost foolish to brandish a student who is unsure or might change their ideas. Like I guess on the back end, if you don't do exactly what you say you're going to do in your application, that's very much the point.
Right.
In the moral sense, no, after school, as I said before. The idea is that
It's the hack.
I guess you're not going to get me to ever tell a student like, no, it was bad of you to say or do that on an application. Like, think of the poor admissions team.
Right.
I'm pretty cynical about this process. I don't believe in lying. I don't like straight up lying about what you have accomplished. However, I gave you practical sense. Like, is that like, no, because college is where you become the problem is we're trying to get into Yale and Duke and Harvard here. And
what if the student, okay, yes, they did have linguistics extracurriculars, but they have no interest in actually like majoring in it, but they know that it's going to give them a leg up. Is that still okay?
I can put it this way. If I have a theoretical student comes to me and they have a strong linguistics background, well, and which major do you think the student wants to do? Like, you can make one up. Was like, what are they calling?
I'm going to say computer science.
It's usually talking computer science. Do they have a computer science background?
It doesn't sound like it.
No computer science background. I would make it very clear to them that we are applying linguistics, because if you go back to my back up your major is an episode that I think is pretty good, and I would be to the point where I would pretty much refuse to work with them if they were not going to be applying linguistics, because I would explain to them, assuming they want to get into the top schools in America, I would talk about back up your major is essentially you have to have proof. You have to be able to prove that everything you're talking about makes sense, but also that you have put the work and energy in, that you're going to continue succeeding on what path you want to go do. And that theoretical path is going to be linguistics, because that student does not get into Stanford or Duke or Harvard for computer science. It's impossible. They don't have any extracurriculars. And I believe pretty strongly in that the major that you purport on your application, pretty much you are heavily weighted against that major. And what that means is if you say you have dreams of being a mathematician, they really care about your math background and your thoughts on math, and care little to none about everything else. I think in some cases it could actually hurt you. That's why don't back up not your major. Write an essay about art At best, they're going to ignore it because you're not applying art, you're applying math. And at worst, they're going to be like, why is this kid doing art? He'll be distracted. It won't be the best mathematician Stanford's ever seen. So that's a problem.
Right. So it's not necessarily that they're choosing a less selective major. It's that they're backing up their major.
Yes, and I think this is going to be probably the big separation we'll be making. How I view this process is that I never, ever, ever, never tell a student to change their life, or we just like lie and turn. Well, I kind of done that. Like, computer science isn't as hard as it used to be, kids. Like that's a side take on this. If you're a computer scientist, just go for it. They've obviously added more computers to the lab. Like it's not that crazy. Like yeah, there's two versions of it. Like one is. The term is strategic positioning, and there are other there was a firm that would openly brag about it, and like I'm sure I could find it was one of the big chains, and they were the ones that like the joke was they turn you into a farmer, then they get you into Cornell School of Agriculture as a farmer,
right? Which
is why this Cornell School of Agriculture now has like 16 supplements and requires like identification that you're in Future Farmers of America, like they. It's a big topic, but I guess back to the original section is I have no qualms against it. It is much more a practical sense, and also it's a wide range. Like it's a slippery slope, I guess, is my thoughts on this concept. That absolutely I support it when it makes sense. However, I don't support it that far out for a number of reasons that we'll get to, and I also believe it eventually reaches the point where it's unfair to the student and kind of like really mean-spirited, I suppose. Like that is at the end of the slippery slope is I don't want to do it because I feel bad. I'd feel bad for making a student feel that way, and we can get to how we end up keep talking. I'll explain how we get to that point, how this could go too far.
So it's less risky than to pick the linguistics major with the linguistics extracurriculars, and it's riskier to have computer science, and which is not aligned to your extracurriculars.
Right. So it heavily depends on the student, because you're telling me the student has no computer science extracurriculars whatsoever. That's when I explain to them, you will not get in for computer science. And it's not so much because like computer science hard. Like it is more that the opposite is also true. If the student only has computer science extracurriculars, we do computer science because that's all you have. And I don't worry. A lot of this is also based on the fact that I simply do not believe computer science is as hard to get into as it was 3 or 4 years ago. Like that is my current belief based on my results, and that changes a lot of these scales because I think a lot of these systems were built on the idea that no one gets in for CS anymore, and I just don't think this is true anymore. But yes, another scenario: the student shows up with strong linguistics extracurriculars, weak. It's probably more common, like weak or marginal computer science extracurriculars.
Right.
Then we have a bigger discussion because I still want to go through linguistics because it is the best supported with their background. However, we almost certainly still incorporate the computer science because here's how in this game I am. I explained if we what option A is we just cut all your CS stuff, and if it's weak enough, I would consider just like we don't mention anything computer science. Like if you take your APs in it certainly, but like you were in you're in a club, you were on the robotics team for a year, like that stuff. We either bury it entirely at the end, or we don't even include it because it's just going to do what I worry about. Whereas if they have like a marginal amount of computer science stuff, like they have done hackathons, they have done some like programming courses and clubs and stuff. That's a weird scenario because I still think we don't write about any of it ever because it's not good. But however, if that stuff's just like on the EC sheet, like I definitely would be at least talking to you about the EC sheet because there's always an alarm I'm trying to evade with students. And it's the same reason that I believe like all essays have to be like of similar quality. It's why I don't swear with students in applications. It's why I don't do like super controversial topics.
Right.
Like there's certain things that there's a meta element to college admissions that I know the person reading these reads a lot of these and knows what they're doing. That there are certain things that's going to make a alarm, like a yellow or red alarm go off. And one of them is a student professing their dutiful love for linguistics. Meanwhile, they have a bunch of computer science extracurriculars on the back end.
Yeah.
That sets off an alarm, which is, well, what is this kid really gonna be taking advantage of our linguistics department, or are they gonna be like the other 6 trillion students who have tried to sneak into computer science through this process because it's outdated, which is why a lot of parents think it's still hot in the streets is also part of the problem.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask you. Like admissions officers, they are trained to see this kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And even if they're not, yes, they talk about it. And if they're not, this is not a new premise. Computer science it's often computer science or engineering, sometimes pre-med, sometimes economics, but it's usually computer science because that's the game. Like they've seen it on both ends. strategic positioning, as it's called, is basically an exploitation of the fact of of the ethos of college admissions in general. That because college admissions is built on the ethos that you learn, you explore, you can't, in good faith, you can't basically, it's like jury nullification. You can't punish a student for lying or not doing what they say they are going to do on their application, because the college itself is supposed to be a period of discovery and learning. However, that is also the fact that the best way to get into schools is to be spiky and to back up your major and to have a cohesive message about what you want to do.
Exactly.
You then add in the process that, yes, it's certainly 5-10 years ago still true. There are certain majors that are less competitive. And there are certain paths into college that are going to be less competitive than others. So you end up with a scenario where other wise guys who should be in finance, but they decided this instead, they figure out, well, we basically lie about what they're going to do into a less competitive major, have them go extracurriculars, then they get in and then take advantage of the fact that they can do whatever they want, and they go to computer science.
Right.
And then I'm sitting there being like, yeah, and Harvard's $300,000, so maybe you should do it. Maybe you can do that. Like, that's kind of my takeaway. Is like, that's where the ethics comes in. Like,
right.
Sorry, homies. Like, maybe so it's a complicated issue. But that is basically the root of strategic positioning as a concept. It is taking advantage of facts about how this process works and how universities work to get students in. And I think that is my big takeaway is, yeah, like 10 years ago, this was very effective. That was the game. And I think I made a joke once that they got sick of all these goddamn 13th century poets coming in and going and asking where the engineering bay is. It's a lot of, it's hard for me to be like, just say like, no, don't do it because it's bad or it doesn't work. I think it's more totally, dude. I have no real hard nose against it. There's a million chinks in it, I suppose.
Right.
And I really know that because this is by far within Bullet the number one thing that parents parents of students that's their cool idea. And I talk about the WeChat. Yeah. The WeChat mafia is privy to strategic positioning. And okay. That's because the WeChat mafia tends to have a bad habit of taking a sledgehammer, like a sledgehammer to a nail kind of thing. This process did work 7 to 12 years ago really well, and it worked okay 5 years ago, and it still technically works in when done correctly. However, there's a lot of flaws with it, and the most common one is, hey, what if we went and did this major instead? And let's talk about the opposite. A student comes to me with all computer science extracurriculars, or like an 80% CS. Yeah. They have taken a few linguistics classes, however, and they are somewhat into it. Well, they or their parent is coming to be like, what if we did linguistics? And I respond to them kind of what I hinted at with you is like, well, what do we do about the 85% computer science extracurriculars? Do we completely ignore them to the point where we consider even dropping them from the EC list? Because I think we need to, honestly, because if we include everything, certainly if we write about them, the kid's not going to get in. The alarm will go off.
The alarm, yeah.
Yeah. We slams down. It's these admissions officers cannot technically that is how they can play defense against this whole thing. They know it, and the way they play defense is with the alarm going off and then throwing the application in the trash, because they're not going to let some kid sneak their way in through linguistics who's obviously going to do that. They're sick of that kid. That is the defense they play, which is why I have to be clever about it. And it's so that's why that's a big problem, because they will catch that. Or do we but then then I was then we delete everything, right? Well, now you're a relatively weak linguistics major trying to get into Duke linguistics, and you're not going to get in that way.
That makes sense. Yes.
We keep talking about it. What other questions do you have about the process? Because I guess I get a little my experience. I've done this type of work, and what is by far the most common is I have a student. It is usually a student who doesn't actually like computer science that much, but has by far the most computer science extracurriculars and wants to do computer science, but they're not that good at computer science.
Right.
And usually they're not that good at other stuff either, but they have other stuff as well. And I guess another a whole a little bomb of those is also the state school versus private school dichotomy. So I'm going to strategic position a student. I'm going to think about a theoretical student I actually worked with. It's okay, so she shows up and she has basically half she has pretty weak data science extracurriculars essentially. And she has stronger but also fairly weak business/econ extracurriculars.
Okay.
She wants to do computer science. We decided to strategically position her. Where this gets more complicated is she also wants to apply to the University of California and Michigan. And this is very important. A problem with strategic positioning is that state schools have basically foregone the ethos of college admissions over the last 10 years because they can't afford to have this process taken to them, which is why for state programs you are almost always locked into the like major you select, or at least the school.
Yes.
And that is a very important part of this whole process.
So it's a bigger risk with the major that you're choosing.
Yes, you're right. It's the put on TikTok. It's like, do not apply linguistics to the University of California, Berkeley, or the University of Michigan, or to UW Seattle, and then expect to get in and switch into computer science or engineering all lickety split. They make it outrageously. Yes, they force you into the school you accept to.
Okay.
So, and I know that, which is why basically the path we have to build is we start by doing the UC work, which is what I start with, and it's a lot, and we basically we kind of postpone a lot of the CS stuff because it's not going to be very useful going forward. Instead, we write an essay that it is basically an econ/business essay. We write about I need to know that, but it's also kind of tailored. You have to split the nail here. It's tailored to have to have plausible deniability. Like she just likes working with numbers, right?
Right.
Then we move on to the Common App and the privates in the supplements for private schools, and it's all business econ. Computer science does not come up at any point because it is not relevant. Business econ, business econ, business econ. Then we return to the UCs and suddenly go, God, Jesus, we have to do a computer science essay.
Right.
Yeah. And so now what you end up with are basically two full applications.
Yes.
And then similarly, and there's Texas, and for your state school, she's a dutiful data scientist. For all the private, she's a dutiful economist.
But those Y school essays are really important to kind of create that story, that narrative.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it ends up basically being a headache because we have to do everything twice. Like it's a lot more work to be able to strategically position it. And at all points it feels kind of dirty because I'm helping this girl uncover her passions for finance and business, and there's a lot of so why do you want to do that? It's like, I don't. I want to do computers.
Yeah.
And that's what it leads to. It's a lot of extra work. And it leads to a lot it feels kind of dirty, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it. And the end result is you end up with a fairly unpassionate, I suppose, business and science application that is not genuine, and a more passionate but still kind of rushed computer science application for your state schools. And a lot of times where I do more work, that tends to cancel out with whatever inherent value of strategically positioning yourself in the first place would have given you. That is my big takeaway. When I have strategically positioned a student, it usually plays out like that, and I'm left with the conclusion this wasn't worth the time and effort. I should have just made it would have been more efficient and been equally effective to just try to pigeonhole them into computer science everywhere, because that is what's best supported.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I guess, and it's interesting you kind of use the term dirty. I'm just curious about your own professional opinion, or maybe just your personal opinion. What do you think about this whole process? Do you think kids are feeling like I need to game the system? Do you think that this needs to be changed, or?
Well, it feels dirty because there's cognitive dissonance, I think. It feels dirty every time because I do. It's real, passion's real, and part of our jobs is talking about students, what they're interested in, and it's actually it's really joyful when they're they find something in school they're really interested in that actually is related to their major. Or for me, when I help them have a recollection about the work they've done that really it is true, it is interesting. That stuff's cool.
Right.
A lot of the pomp and circumstance about finding yourself and the magic of interdisciplinary education, that stuff, I can often be very cynical and LOL about it, but it's real when it's real. It feels good. Well, the opposite is when, I have the, okay, so we're lying about this, but if you did give a shit about this major, what would you think? Those conversations tend to pop up, and when you are basically being false, and it also leads to me having to fill in a lot of the cracks because the student doesn't know.
That's true. Yeah.
The student doesn't have a real answer about what they would want to do with this, what their takeaway is about this econ program they did and how that relates to their future. That's not their future. They're doing computer science. Those things add up, and that's where I say dirty. But if you want to get much dirtier, is either I guess in my version, whole hog lying. Mm-hmm. So option B is, and if you want to get really dirty, what other this firm I'm thinking of, well, they would take it the next step. So we meet with students, and usually we start the summer and we're doing the actual application work. And there's only so much strategic positioning you can do because extracurriculars are set in stone.
Right.
However, what these firms will do and is they'll get a student as a freshman or a sophomore, or ninth grader, eighth grader. And they'll say like, okay, well, you want to do computer science? Well, like tough S, like you're not good enough for it. You're a farmer now. Like, no, you're a poet. You're a poet now. You're a Latin studies, and I think it will be that brutal. And like,
wow,
they will just what you might imagine in a college consulting firm. We met students, like I've done high school counseling, and like I try to set them on the best way what they want to do. Instead, imagine it's like, okay, so you are now a farmer, and like, well, look at that. We have connections with farming extracurricular places all around the Bay Area or whatever. And like, okay, junior, like put some gloves on. Like you're going to the farm now.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's where this gets mean. And I say like, I don't, and that's not, I think about it, it's like that. Yeah, and that's what they do. It's like, that is the most logical conclusion. And that is, I understand why that would be more effective. But now you have a student, like that's like it's pretty messed up. The student, like, their high school years are defined by being pigeonholed into these pre-built extracurricular labs and research opportunities and nonprofits and whatever, being funneled through this garbage, basically entirely in service of them lying on their application, but in a way that is believable because they are a member of the Future Farmers of America now,
right,
to then get into an elite university in which they can finally go do what they want to do, which ironically enough is also probably not what they want to do, but their parents think that they should do computer science, so they're going to go do computer science.
Right.
Like that's a pretty dark path, I think.
It is dark,
but also super believable, like in college admissions mania, I get how that and I get how that would be effective, although not as effective as it used to be, because I think these schools do, so that's never going to be me ever. And I guess the fact that really bums me out, like makes me kind of sick to my stomach and wonder like what's wrong with this industry. Well, I've now explained where I draw the line, which is I have done the type, I move all the way up here, the point where even that is like it's pretty skeezy. Like I don't know, like me openly saying like, okay, we're lying here. How are we gonna lie about this? And it leads to me not feeling great about it, but probably more powerfully, me like this wasn't worth it. It's like I think as long as like whenever I strategically position students, I'm just left with the impression of like why I don't do it more. It's like it's not worth it. It's not that fun.
Right.
And it doesn't work that well. The students don't get in at the same level. And I can tell the work isn't that good. I guess there's one student strategically positioned to be an English major, and I remember it was telling how much easier and more pleasant and successful that process was. And that is because I was able to lie for them. I was able to write their crap for them. And that was very enlightening for me. It's like, I can turn any student into a writer, or like, oh, FLL, it's like the effing love learning. My big strategy, like a big concept about it is basically talking shop, knowing ball about the academic subjects that inspire you. And that will be another episode we get deep in the weeds. Like it's effective because I an actual dutiful computer science or a dutiful poet or a dutiful mathematician, I send them off to write like hardcore professional level paragraphs about their subject matter that we put in their essays. And it's a very effective strategy. Well, that a lot of my other stuff completely falls apart when the student is not a dutiful expert at whatever they're trying to do. Like at best, they have I can't lie for them in that way, and like that's why the part with the one student who we were turning into a writer, an English major, I could. It was telling, and like it was. That also made me feel gross on the back end, like just how good I was at it, because I am a expert, dutiful writer, and I also can close read things and have takeaways. I can't do anything. I don't have any other like talents. So I'm mostly against it, I guess. It's like you brought up this subject. It's such a complicated subject matter, and mostly against it is I'm now being a lawyer on both sides of what I feel about it. And my takeaway is, at best, I usually think it's kind of a waste. It mostly makes me wish I had just like I don't regret doing it. Sometimes, like quite honestly, it makes me realize that, like the student wasn't a great student to work with. Like maybe that's probably close to the truth. In my limited slots,
interesting.
I would have been better served, and the results would have been better to have a student I didn't have to strategically position, because in nature of having to do so, they usually aren't the strongest student in the first place. Because what I don't do is, if a student's like a pretty strong computer scientist, like but not great, I do not that's probably more common. I do not hide that. Like we say, like this is what you got, bro. We're doing computer science, and it has been a much more fulfilling and successful strategy to just use what we have and what they actually want to do as powerfully as we possibly can. And that's why this is all weighted. 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have a different opinion. This is weighted against. I've had real good results with computer science applicants getting into top schools the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
and that has radically shifted my views on like how I do things, because it turns out like a good, not great computer science, like framed correctly and really giving an interesting thing, that is a more successful strategy than turning them into something else. And maybe that's why I am less and less interested in the something else strategy.
Okay. And so for juniors, they're finishing second semester of junior year, summer and fall is coming, college application season for them is coming. What do you think is your key piece of advice for juniors who maybe are trying to figure out their major and the extracurriculars they have, because they've been doing them now for 2.5 years. So how can they kind of best strategically position themselves to get ready for college applications?
Yeah, I guess strategic positioning is it doesn't have to be lying. It's just how do you strategically position yourself?
Right.
Well, you can link it here, Charlene. There's an episode, Back Up Your Major. I would recommend, if any student is interested, go listen to that podcast, that episode. And what you'll find is, the good news is it's not too late. If you're sitting here, it's currently January, you find this in February, March maybe, and you are applying. Well, you should know. That is probably my first bit. Is but you should probably have a pretty good idea of what major you plan to be applying for schools by now. If you don't, you should go figure that out. And that Back of Your Major episode gives some good advice on how, in general, it should be what you want to do. And you have time still. These applications are due at the earliest on November 1st, but more of them due on January 1st. You have somewhere between 10 and 12 months or so to continue building your application. And basically you can be continuing to build your extracurriculars until the second the thing goes out. That all counts. I've had students finish things a week before it goes in. It's fine. You can be creative with the dates of when things finished. Even if starting from basically you either have an idea. If in lieu of an idea, you should think about what is best supported. And that may or may not match what you want to be doing in your future. However, that's where it gets a little tricky. Hopefully they do match, right? If what you're interested in, if matches, great. If not, you should consider just how much you've built in one versus what you want to be doing. So let's say linguistics, computer science. Let's say you are a 6 in linguistics and a 4 in computer science. I think you should table the linguistics, or more appropriately try to incorporate linguistics into your computer science. That's a whole different argument. Is you should be combining. And that's actually what I'm going to do next episode, is about if you're well-rounded, what do you do?
Right.
Because that's but I think it should be pretty gas pedal. Go pick a major, and if you're a 6 for linguistics, 4 computer science, I think you should still, but you want to do computer science, you should still pick computer science as the major you're going to go for. And the next 10 months should be pretty gas pedal trying to boost that major as much as possible. Because it's not you are doomed if you have content that isn't related to computer science. And that's where next time the episode about mixing is if you can combine your interests in computer science, that's an excellent way to kind of get brownie points for both. If it's 8 linguistics, 2 computer science, but you want to do computer science, it's probably time to accept that you're going to be applying linguistics to all these schools in America, and that's okay. I cannot sit here and say, no, don't do it, it's a bad idea, because I guarantee you there will be more circumstances where I see a student's application and go, yep, we got to lie here. It's just and don't feel bad about it. But do know it's an annoying, harrowing road, and that you need to apply computer science for the state schools, because you have to, that's what you have to do. And that's why combining is usually your best bet, because combining is so helpful, because it allows you to then write about stuff in a way that you can reuse it.
Right.
And I'm thinking about, so much of me is just thinking about the logistics applied to schools. Is if you're strategically positioning and having to do 2 different majors, that's twice as much work in a way that is daunting, to say the least. But go watch that podcast and be cognizant, because it does matter. The strategic positioning is, unlike institutional priorities, this is totally real, it totally matters, and there are pluses and benefits. There are benefits and minuses. Any other questions?
No, I think that was really good advice, and it was really an interesting discussion today.
Yeah, sometimes these more complicated topics, I need to just talk my way through it, almost like I'm prosecution and defense of it. I guarantee you there will be students who continue to come, and it's a topic. I just think I might handle applications differently with similar criteria than I did 2 or 3 years ago, based on the fact that I've tried to strategically position and seen what happens, and it's mostly doesn't work that great. And also, I truly believe it is easier to get into these schools for computer science than it was 5 or 10 years ago. It's really 5 years ago, because that is one of the big computer science is the biggest change. Like the history of me, this is my 6th year, 7th year entering of this process. Computer science and how you get in for it and how hard it is and what it means has absolutely been the defining change of this experience. Pretty much everything else has stayed the same through COVID, through Supreme Court decisions, through everything. Like college is college, getting into college is college. But computer science continues to be the modifier that's constantly changing. And I believe here at the beginning of 2025, one way or another, they have shuffled the deck, and it is not as hard as it was 5 years ago to get into CS. They have more computers, they have more chairs, and because of that, that does change a lot of the strategy, and that's why it goes back to just backing up your major and getting in for what is best support is probably going to be my philosophy going forward much more often than not.
All right.
Thank you, Michelle. Talk to you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for watching College with Mattie. For more information or a coaching session with Mattie, visit collegewithmattie.com. You can follow College with Mattie on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Tune in next week for more episodes, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.